Number 1. This 1934 Chevrolet three-window coupe, currently listed at $60,000 in Russellville, Tennessee, is a highly customized pre-war street rod that combines the timeless proportions of one of Chevrolet's most desirable early coupe body styles with modern comfort features, polished presentation, and AV8 power drivetrain built for cruising and show appeal. According to the seller, this coupe is powered by a 305 Chevrolet Crossfire engine and has been driven approximately 6,000 miles. It is paired with an automatic transmission and is described as running great, which suggests that the car has been built not just to look impressive, but also to be enjoyed on the road. While the listing does not go into full mechanical detail, the overall description makes it clear that this is a thoroughly customized street rod rather than a lightly restored original car. In my opinion, one of the standout qualities of this Chevrolet is its emphasis on presentation and convenience. The seller highlights chrome throughout the build, stainless steel exhaust, and a stainless steel fuel tank, all of which suggest that considerable effort was put into both appearance and long-term durability. Cars like this are often built with the goal of being clean, eye-catching cruisers that can perform well at local shows while still offering the comfort needed for real driving. The interior and convenience features are also a major part of this car's appeal. According to the seller, it includes a power driver's seat, an overhead console with CD audio, and a power trunk, along with plenty of storage. Those are not the kinds of upgrades you typically see on a more traditional bare-bones hot rod. Instead, they point to a build that leans toward the restomod side of the hobby, where classic styling is paired with features intended to make the car more comfortable and user-friendly. Personally, I think the 1934 Chevrolet three-window coupe is a body style that naturally lends itself to this kind of custom build. It has the compact proportions, sweeping fenders, an upright pre-war design that enthusiasts love, but is also uncommon enough to stand apart from the sea of Ford-based street rods. That alone gives it a certain individuality in the collector market. The 305 Crossfire engine is also an interesting choice. It may not be the most common engine found in high-dollar street rods, but it still offers dependable small-block Chevrolet power, and for some buyers that matters more than having the biggest horsepower number. In my opinion, if the car is sorted properly and truly runs as well as described, the appeal here is less about outright performance and more about having a distinctive, fully built classic that is comfortable, flashy, and ready to enjoy. Overall, this 1934 Chevrolet appears to be aimed at someone who wants a finished, attention-grabbing street rod with plenty of custom touches and a strong visual presence. For buyers who appreciate pre-war coupes, but want something more polished and comfort-oriented than a traditional hot rod, this example seems like a very interesting package. At $60,000, the value will likely come down to the quality of the build in person, but based on the seller's description, it appears to offer a blend of rarity, show-ready presentation, and cruising comfort that could make it stand out in the classic car market. Number 2. In my opinion, this 1934 Ford three-window coupe, currently listed at $26,000 in Harrison, Ohio, is a well-equipped street rod that captures the unmistakable look of one of the most iconic hot rod body styles ever produced, while pairing it with a dependable small-block Chevrolet drivetrain and a number of thoughtful performance-oriented upgrades. Although it is a fiberglass-bodied build rather than an all-steel original car, it appears to have been assembled with the right combination of classic style, modern drivability, and proven aftermarket hardware. According to the seller, this coupe is powered by a 350 cubic inch Chevrolet V8 backed by a GMTH automatic transmission, a combination that has become one of the most trusted formulas in the street rod world. That setup is popular for good reason. It is relatively simple, parts are easy to find, and it offers a strong balance of power, reliability, and ease of maintenance. In my view, that makes this car especially attractive for someone who wants the look of a traditional hot rod without the headaches that sometimes come with more exotic or less proven drivetrains. What makes this particular build more interesting than a basic engine swap coupe is the addition of MSD atomic fuel injection, MSD ignition, and a Holley high-tech dual air cleaner setup. Those upgrades suggest that the car was built with an emphasis on smoother performance, easier starting, and more modern fuel delivery compared to an older carbureted setup. For a driver-oriented street rod, Those are meaningful improvements because they can make the car more enjoyable and less temperamental in everyday use. From my perspective, the suspension and brake upgrades are another major selling point. The Mustang 2 style front suspension is one of the most common and practical front-end conversions used in hot rods because it improves steering feel, ride quality, and front-end geometry. Out back, the Ford 8.8 rear axle combined with a 4-link coil suspension should provide a more stable and controlled ride than an older leaf spring arrangement. The inclusion of a Willwood master cylinder and front calipers is also a strong detail, as it indicates that braking performance was taken seriously rather than treated as an afterthought. The 1934 Ford 3-window coupe itself is a body style that needs almost no introduction among hot rod enthusiasts. It has long been one of the most desirable platforms in American custom car culture thanks to its chopped-looking roofline, compact proportions, and aggressive stance, even in stock form. Finished in black with a gray interior. This example sounds like it follows the traditional street rod formula while still keeping the presentation clean and understated. Of course, because this is a fiberglass-bodied car, it may not appeal to buyers who only want original steel-bodied Fords. But in my opinion, that is also part of what helps keep the asking price more attainable. Fiberglass hot rods often give buyers access to the same visual appeal and driving enjoyment of a classic coupe without the significantly higher cost associated with rust-free steel originals. Overall, I believe this 1934 Ford 3-window coupe presents itself as a very solid street rod package for the money. With its classic hot rod styling, proven Chevrolet V8 power, upgraded suspension and brakes, and modern ignition and fuel injection components, it looks like a car that was built to be enjoyed rather than endlessly sorted out. For someone wanting a turnkey coupe with traditional looks and practical performance upgrades, this one appears to be a very appealing option. Number 3. This 1938 Chevrolet sedan, currently listed at $35,000 in Prospect, Connecticut, is a fully built street rod that combines classic pre-war Chevrolet styling with a custom hot rod stance, modern suspension upgrades, and a proven small block V8 drivetrain. According to the seller, the car has been built to run and drive like a modern vehicle while still keeping the unmistakable character of a late 1930s American sedan. Power comes from a Chevrolet 350 V8 paired with a turbo 350 automatic transmission, a combination that has long been one of the most popular setups in the street rod world. In my opinion, that pairing makes a lot of sense for a car like this because it offers dependable performance, easy parts availability, and a level of simplicity that many classic car owners appreciate. It is the kind of drivetrain that can make an older custom car much easier to enjoy on a regular basis, rather than turning it into a constant project. One of the most defining features of this build is the chopped top, which immediately changes the profile of the car and gives it a much more aggressive street rod look. Combined with a bright red exterior and custom gray interior, this Chevy appears to have been built not just for comfort, but also for strong visual impact. Personally, I think the chopped roof works especially well on 1938 Chevrolet because the body already has smooth, rounded lines, and lowering the roofline makes the entire car look longer, sleeker, and more dramatic. The seller also notes several important mechanical upgrades, including a Mustang 2 front suspension, power rack and pinion steering, power brakes, and front disc brakes. Those are the kinds of modifications that really change how a pre-war car feels on the road. In my view, these upgrades are what separate a true driver-focused street rod from a simple engine-swapped old car, because they improve handling, braking, and overall confidence behind the wheel. Air conditioning is another major plus, especially in a custom build like this. It adds a level of comfort that makes the car more usable in real-world conditions, particularly on longer cruises or summer events. The seller describes the paint and drivetrain as being in excellent condition and says the car needs nothing, which, if accurate, makes this Chevy especially attractive to someone who wants a turnkey classic rather than a project. What stands out to me most is the overall tone of the listing. This does not sound like a car that still needs sorting or finishing touches. Instead, it seems to be positioned as a ready-to-enjoy street rod that can be driven immediately and confidently. For buyers who want the look of a traditional custom but the ease of a modernized cruiser, that could be a very appealing combination. Overall, if the seller's description accurately reflects the car's condition, this 1938 Chevrolet sedan appears to be a well-finished and highly usable street rod with the right blend of style, performance, and comfort. In my opinion, it has the kind of setup that makes it equally suitable for weekend cruising, local shows, and longer road trips, which is exactly what many enthusiasts want from a classic custom build. Number 4. This 1947 Chevrolet Deluxe Custom Coupe, currently listed at $45,000 in Perrysburg, Ohio, is a professionally built post-war street rod that blends classic Chevrolet styling with big block power, custom body modifications, and a long list of comfort and performance upgrades. With only about 1,000 miles driven since the build was completed in 2004, this car appears to have been preserved more as a show-quality custom than a heavily used cruiser. According to the seller, the car is powered by a 454 cubic inch V8 paired with a TH350 automatic transmission, giving it the kind of muscle that instantly separates it from a typical restored 1940s Chevrolet. In my opinion, that big block setup is one of the most exciting parts of the build because a 454 in a lightweight custom coupe should deliver serious torque, a strong exhaust note, and the kind of performance that fits the car's aggressive hot rod personality. What also stands out to me is how extensively this Chevy has been modernized underneath. It features a Camaro front clip, box frame, Ford 9-inch rear end, 4-bar rear suspension, and coilovers, which suggests the car was built not just for looks, but also for strength, stability, and improved handling. Those upgrades are a major advantage in a custom car like this because they make it far more capable and confidence-inspiring on modern roads than a stock 1940s chassis would ever be. The body modifications are another major part of the car's identity. The shaved doors, trunk, and hood, along with electric and mechanical releases, give it a much cleaner and more custom appearance than a factory-style restoration. The louver hood adds even more hot rod attitude. And personally, I think details like that really help define the car as a serious custom build rather than just an engine swap classic. Inside, the car appears to be just as thoroughly finished. The leather interior, power windows, power seats, digital gauges, its steering column, locker shifter, stereo system, and vintage air conditioning all point toward a build that was designed to offer comfort along with performance. In my view, that combination is what makes a custom coupe like this especially appealing, because it gives you the look of a late 1940s Chevrolet with the convenience of a far more modern street machine. The seller also mentions disc brakes, a large aluminum radiator, 3-inch exhaust, rear tubs, a fuel cell, and a trunk-mounted battery, all of which reinforce the idea that this was a serious custom build with attention given to both appearance and function. The black exterior paired with a gray interior is also a smart choice in my opinion, because it keeps the car looking sleek and timeless while allowing the custom bodywork and stance to do most of the talking. Overall, if the workmanship and mechanical condition are as strong as the seller suggests, this 1947 Chevrolet Deluxe Custom Coupe looks like a very well-equipped street rod with big horsepower, quality chassis upgrades, and the kind of custom touches that make it stand out at both car shows and cruise nights. For someone looking for a post-war Chevy that goes far beyond a basic restoration, this one appears to offer serious presence, strong performance, and a lot of personality. Number 5. This 1940 Chevrolet Special Deluxe two-door sedan, currently listed at $18,000 in York, South Carolina, is a partially completed street rod project that blends classic pre-war Chevrolet styling with a long list of modern comfort and drivability upgrades. In my opinion, what makes this car especially interesting is that it appears to be much more than just a basic engine swap classic. Even though the seller mentions that health issues prevented the project from being fully finished, the foundation already seems to be in place for a very comfortable and usable custom cruiser. For someone looking for a vintage car with modern features, this one has a lot going for it. According to the listing, the car is powered by a 350 Chevrolet V8 paired with a turbo 350 automatic transmission, which is one of the most common and proven combinations in the street rod world. From a practical standpoint, that setup is popular for a reason. It offers dependable performance, easy parts availability, and straightforward maintenance. In a build like this, it also makes the car far more enjoyable in modern traffic than the original 1940 drivetrain would have been. The chassis upgrades are equally important. The seller notes that the car has a Mustang 2 front suspension along with power steering and power brakes. In my view, those are some of the most valuable improvements you can make to a pre-war street rod because they dramatically improve steering feel, road manners, and stopping confidence. Instead of driving like a fragile 1940 sedan, this Chevrolet was clearly being set up to feel much more stable and manageable on today's roads. Comfort features are another major highlight here. This special Deluxe reportedly includes air conditioning, power windows, and even power seats, which is a pretty impressive list for a 1940 Chevrolet. Personally, I think that's what shifts this car from being just a fun hot rod into something closer to a real vintage cruiser. Something you could actually enjoy on longer drives, local car shows, or weekend road trips without giving up every modern convenience. Cosmetically, the car is finished in burgundy with a gray interior, and it also has hidden hinges, new tires, and new wheels. Those details suggest the builder was aiming for a cleaner, more refined custom look rather than a rough, unfinished project. The hidden hinges in particular are one of those subtle custom touches that street rod builders often use to give the body a smoother, more polished appearance. The seller states that the car runs good and drives good, which in my opinion is a very important detail because it means the next owner would not necessarily be starting from scratch. Even if there are still small details left to complete, it sounds like the major mechanical work has already been done and the car can at least be enjoyed while those finishing touches are addressed. Overall, I think this 1940 Chevrolet Special Deluxe represents a solid opportunity for someone who wants a vintage street rod with modern equipment already installed, but who doesn't mind taking over the final stage of someone else's build. At $18,000, it seems positioned as a driver-quality custom with a lot of desirable upgrades already completed, making it an appealing option for a buyer who wants classic styling, V8 power, and comfort features without paying full show car money. Number 6. This 1935 Dodge DU, currently listed at $19,500 in Canton, Ohio, is a pre-war Mopar street rod project that appears to offer a strong mechanical foundation, modern drivability upgrades, and a mostly completed build, with the interior upholstery standing out as the main remaining task for the next owner. According to the seller, this Dodge has been fitted with a small block Chevrolet 350 V8 backed by a turbo 350 automatic transmission, a combination that has long been one of the most common and dependable setups in the street rod world. In my opinion, that pairing is a big part of this car's appeal because it usually means easier maintenance, broad parts availability, and a driving experience that is much more relaxed than what a stock 1930s Dodge would offer. The chassis has also been updated with a Mustang 2 front end, along with power brakes, which should make the car feel far more manageable in modern traffic than an original pre-war suspension setup. The seller also mentions a tilt steering wheel, front power windows, newer wheels and tires, and even a backup camera, which tells me this isn't a bare-bones traditional hot rod. Instead, it sounds more like a practical driver-oriented build that was meant to blend vintage styling with modern convenience. One detail that stands out to me is the fact that the entire vehicle was recently rewired. On older custom builds, wiring quality can make a huge difference in both reliability and peace of mind, so having that work already completed could be a major advantage for the next owner. The seller also says the car runs amazing, which, if accurate, suggests that the hard part of the project may already be done from a mechanical standpoint. What keeps this Dodge from being a fully finished turnkey street rod is the interior. The seller is very upfront that upholstery is what the car still needs, and honestly, I think that transparency helps the listing. Rather than paying full money for someone else's finished interior choices, a buyer could treat this as an opportunity to complete the cabin to their own taste, whether that means going with a traditional bench seat look, a more modern custom interior, or something in between. Personally, I think the 1935 Dodge DU is interesting because it offers something different from the usual Ford and Chevrolet street rod builds. Dodge bodies from the mid-1930s have a distinctive shape and tend to stand out simply because you do not see them nearly as often at local shows or cruise-ins. That uniqueness can be a real advantage for someone who wants a classic that doesn't look like everyone else's car. Overall, this looks like the kind of build that could make sense for someone who wants a mostly sorted pre-war street rod without paying the premium for a fully finished show car. At $19,500, the value here seems to be in the upgraded drivetrain, refreshed wiring, modern front suspension, and the fact that it appears to be a running, driving car that mainly needs interior completion. If the body, paint, and mechanical work check out in person, this 1935 Dodge could be a very appealing entry into the street rod market for a buyer who doesn't mind finishing the last stage of the project. Number 7. In my opinion, this 1941 Pontiac, currently listed at $24,500 in Lumberport, West Virginia, is a classic pre-war cruiser that has been thoughtfully updated with a more modern drivetrain and comfort-oriented features, making it far more approachable for regular driving than a completely stock example from the same era. Rather than being marketed as a strict restoration, it appears to be a practical Restomod-style build aimed at buyers who want vintage styling without giving up the convenience of modern upgrades. According to the seller, the car is powered by a 350 Chevrolet V8 paired with an automatic transmission, which is one of the most common and proven combinations in the classic car world. In my view, this swap makes a lot of sense for a vehicle like this because it improves parts availability, simplifies maintenance, and generally makes the car easier to live with than its original drivetrain would have been. The addition of power steering and power brakes further reinforces the idea that this Pontiac was built to be driven and enjoyed rather than simply stored away as a collector piece. One of the more appealing details, in my opinion, is the inclusion of air conditioning. That may sound like a small feature, but in a large pre-war car, it can make a huge difference in real-world enjoyment, especially for owners who want to use the vehicle for summer cruising, local shows, or weekend trips. The aftermarket gauges also suggest that attention was given to monitoring the engine and keeping the car functional as a modernized driver rather than preserving a completely factory-original dashboard setup. The seller describes the car as running great and mentions that receipts are included, which is always a positive sign. Documentation can add confidence to a classic car purchase because it gives potential buyers a clearer picture of what work has been completed and how the car has been maintained over time. Even though the listing is brief, the presence of receipts suggests the vehicle has not simply been assembled casually, but has likely seen some organized investment and care. From a styling perspective, a 1941 Pontiac naturally carries a lot of visual presence. Cars from this period still had the dramatic flowing fenders and substantial body lines that defined pre-war American design, but they were also beginning to look more refined and streamlined. When combined with modern drivability upgrades like a small block Chevy V8, automatic transmission, and air conditioning, that classic styling becomes much easier to enjoy on today's roads. Overall, I believe this 1941 Pontiac offers a nice middle ground between antique character and practical usability. It may not be the choice for a buyer seeking a factory-correct restoration, but for someone who wants a distinctive pre-war American car with V8 power, automatic transmission, air conditioning, and power accessories already in place, it appears to be a strong and very usable classic at its current asking price. Number 8. This 1940 Chevrolet Coupe, currently listed at $21,000 in Alet, Virginia, is a classic pre-war Chevy that has been transformed into a big block-powered street cruiser, blending timeless 1940s coupe styling with the kind of V8 performance that hot rod enthusiasts have always loved. According to the seller, the car is powered by a 396 cubic inch Chevrolet big block engine paired with a TH350 automatic transmission, creating a setup that leans more towards strong street performance than simple factory-style cruising. What immediately stands out to me about this car is the engine choice. A 396 big block is a serious step up from the more common small block swap seen in many street rods, and in my opinion, that gives this Chevy a much more aggressive personality. The seller also mentions an Edelbrock Performer RPM intake and 1.7 roller rockers, which suggests the engine has been upgraded for improved breathing and stronger overall performance. While the listing does not go into full mechanical detail, it definitely sounds like this coupe was built to deliver more punch than your average vintage cruiser. The drivetrain is backed by a TH350 automatic transmission, which is a tried-and-true choice in classic custom builds. It is simple, durable, and well-matched to a torque-heavy engine like a 396. For someone looking for a classic that is easy to drive without sacrificing muscle car character, that combination makes a lot of sense. In my view, it strikes a nice balance between old-school performance and practical usability. The seller also notes that the car is equipped with air conditioning, heat, power steering, and power brakes, which are all valuable upgrades in a vehicle from this era. These kinds of comfort and drivability improvements make a huge difference in how often a classic can actually be enjoyed. A 1940 Chevrolet coupe with a big block under the hood is already appealing on its own, but when you add features like power steering and climate control, it becomes a much more realistic car to use for weekend cruises, local shows, or even longer drives. Visually, the silver exterior paired with a black interior gives the car a clean and fairly timeless look. It sounds like the build may lean more toward a driver-quality custom than a full show car, but honestly, that is not a bad thing. In my opinion, some of the most enjoyable classics are the ones that are built to be driven regularly rather than polished constantly and parked most of the time. The seller describes the car as running great, which is obviously a positive sign, though with any custom build, I would still want to verify the quality of the installation, suspension setup, and overall finish in person. Still, based on the description alone, this seems like one of those cars that could appeal to someone who wants a vintage body style with a much stronger performance edge than stock. Overall, if the seller's description accurately reflects the car's condition, this 1940 Chevrolet coupe appears to be a solid and interesting street machine with a lot of personality. In my view, the combination of classic Chevrolet styling, big block power, automatic transmission, and comfort upgrades gives it the kind of broad appeal that makes it more than just a weekend toy. It feels like the sort of car that could turn heads at a cruise night, sound great pulling away from a stoplight, and still be comfortable enough to enjoy on the open road. Number 9. This 1933 Ford 3-window coupe, currently listed at $38,000 in Plymouth, Connecticut, is a classic hot rod build that combines one of the most iconic body styles in American automotive history with a modern chassis, V8 power, and comfort-oriented upgrades that make it far more enjoyable to drive than an original pre-war coupe. According to the seller, this Ford is built with a Downs body mounted on an Outlaw chassis, which immediately tells me this is not a basic old car restoration, but a purpose-built street rod designed for modern performance and reliability. Power comes from a 350 cubic inch V8 producing around 350 horsepower, paired with an automatic transmission with overdrive. In my opinion, that is a very smart drivetrain choice for a car like this because it offers strong, dependable performance while still being comfortable on the highway thanks to the overdrive transmission. One of the biggest strengths of this build, in my view, is that it seems to prioritize real-world drivability rather than just show car appearance. The seller mentions air conditioning, power steering, power brakes, and a power trunk, all of which are features that make a major difference in day-to-day enjoyment. A lot of traditional hot rods look great, but can be tiring to drive for long distances. So having those convenience upgrades makes this car feel more like a usable cruiser than a weekend-only toy. The 1933 Ford 3-window body style is already one of the most desirable shapes in the hot rod world, and for good reason. The compact coupe roofline, aggressive proportions, and unmistakable early Ford grille make it a timeless platform for custom builds. Personally, I think that even without seeing every detail of the car, the fact that it uses a 3-window coupe body on a quality aftermarket chassis gives it strong appeal right away, because those are the kinds of ingredients that usually lead to a very enjoyable street rod. The seller also reports only about 4,000 miles driven, which may suggest relatively limited use since the build was completed. If that mileage reflects time on the finished car, it could mean the vehicle still feels fresh mechanically while already being sorted enough to show that it runs and drives as intended. Overall, if the build quality matches the seller's description, this 1933 Ford 3-window coupe appears to be a well-rounded street rod with classic hot rod styling, solid small block Chevy power, and the kind of comfort upgrades that make it easier to actually enjoy on the road. For someone looking for a recognizable pre-war Ford coupe with modern drivability and proven hot rod components, this one sounds like a very appealing package. Number 10. This 1935 Ford Coupe, currently listed at $49,500 in Manchester, New Hampshire, is a fully built all-steel street rod that combines iconic pre-war Ford styling with serious small block power, upgraded driveline hardware, and the kind of road-ready equipment that makes it more than just a weekend showpiece. In my opinion, what immediately makes this car stand out is the fact that it's described as an all-steel build. In the street rod world, that matters. A lot of custom 30s coupes on the market are fiberglass-bodied replicas or mixed material builds. But an all-steel 1935 Ford carries a different level of appeal because it preserves the authenticity and substance of the original body while still allowing for modern performance underneath. Power comes from a Blueprint 383-stroker V8, which is a major step above a basic small block swap. For me, that's one of the biggest selling points of the entire car. A 383-stroker usually delivers strong low-end torque and a much more aggressive driving personality than a standard 350, which means this Ford was likely built to be genuinely fast rather than simply comfortable. It's paired with a built-turbo 350 automatic transmission and, even more importantly, a gear vendor's overdrive unit. That overdrive addition is a big deal because it makes a powerful street rod like this much more practical on the highway, helping reduce RPM at cruising speeds and making long-distance driving easier on both the engine and the driver. Out back, the car uses a Ford 9-inch rear end with 3.70 gears, which in my view is exactly the kind of hardware you want in a car with this level of power. The Ford 9-inch is legendary for strength and durability, and the 3.70 gearing suggests a balance between strong acceleration and usable cruising, especially with the help of the overdrive system. The chassis setup also sounds very well thought out. The seller mentions a Mustang independent front suspension, along with power steering, power brakes, and four-wheel disc brakes. That combination tells me this car wasn't built just to look good parked at a show. It was built to actually drive. One of the biggest compromises with original mid-1930s cars is the outdated suspension and braking feel. So having an independent front end and modern braking system dramatically changes the ownership experience. In practical terms, it should steer better, stop better, and feel much more confidence-inspiring at modern road speeds. Cosmetically, the car sounds just as bold as the mechanical package. It's finished in black with a red and white interior, which is a classic hot rod color combination that fits a 35 Ford Coupe extremely well. In my opinion, that interior choice gives the car a strong traditional street rod personality, flashy enough to stand out, but still appropriate for the era and style of the build. The seller also describes the car as very nice and 100% dependable. And while I always take that kind of claim with the usual classic car caution, the overall parts combination here does support the idea that this was built to be a reliable, usable rod rather than a fragile trailer queen. With only around 300 miles listed, it also sounds like the car hasn't seen much road use recently, which may mean the next owner is getting a fairly fresh build or a recently refreshed one. Overall, I think this 1935 Ford Coupe is one of those builds that hits a very desirable middle ground between traditional hot rod styling and modern drivability. It has the all-steel body collectors like to see, the kind of V8 power that gives it real performance credibility, and enough suspension, braking, and overdrive upgrades to make it practical for actual road use. At just under $50,000, it's priced like a serious finished street rod, but based on the equipment list, it also looks like the kind of car that could justify that number for someone who wants a classic Ford Coupe with real muscle and real usability. Number 11. This 1936 Ford sedan, currently listed at $29,999 in Mooresville, North Carolina, is a professionally built two-door street rod that combines the timeless look of a pre-war Ford with a proven small-block Chevrolet drivetrain and the kind of comfort upgrades that make it much easier to enjoy on modern roads. According to the listing, this car is being offered by DC Classic Cars and is powered by a 350 Chevrolet V8 paired with a turbo 350 automatic transmission. That is one of the most familiar combinations in the street rod world, and in my opinion, that matters because it usually translates to easier maintenance, strong parts availability, and dependable cruising performance. Instead of trying to preserve strict factory originality, This build appears to focus on usability, which is often exactly what buyers want from a classic driver. The car is finished in blue with a matching blue interior, a color combination that gives it a very distinct and coordinated look. The seller notes that the interior is done in blue velour, which immediately tells me this build likely reflects the style of an earlier street rod era, when plush custom interiors were a big part of the appeal. Depending on the buyer, that can either feel nostalgic or a little old school, but either way it gives the car personality rather than making it look like a generic cookie-cutter build. Mechanically, the car seems to have the right ingredients for comfortable cruising. In addition to the V8 and automatic transmission, it has power steering, power brakes, front disc brakes, rear drum brakes, and air conditioning. To me, those are some of the most important upgrades on a street rod like this because they make the car far easier to drive and enjoy than a stock 1930 sedan. The addition of tilt steering, windshield wipers, a tachometer, and a Sony AM/FM cassette stereo also reinforces the impression that this was built to be driven, not just parked and admired. The listing also mentions chrome valve covers and an air cleaner, a GM rear end, Goodyear tires, and GM rally wheels, all of which fit the formula of a traditional small block street rod with a mild custom flavor. It does not sound like an extreme horsepower build or a radical pro street project. Instead, it feels more like a well-sorted cruiser with enough upgrades to keep it enjoyable and reliable without becoming overly complicated. Personally, I think 1936 Ford sedans are underrated in the street rod world. They do not always get the same spotlight as 3-window coupes or 5-window coupes, but they offer more cabin space, a comfortable roofline, and a body shape that still carries that unmistakable pre-war Ford character. For a buyer who actually wants to spend time behind the wheel rather than just look at the car in the garage, a sedan can make a lot of sense. At just under $30,000, this Ford strikes me as the kind of car aimed at someone who wants a finished classic with a recognizable hot rod formula rather than a project or a six-figure showpiece. It may not be the rarest or most radical build on the market, but if the quality of the workmanship matches the equipment list, it appears to offer a solid mix of vintage style, V8 power, and real-world drivability. For someone who likes the look of a pre-war Ford but wants the convenience of a more modern street rod setup, this 1936 Ford sedan looks like a very usable and appealing package. Number 12. In my opinion, this 1939 Ford Deluxe, currently listed at $16,500 in Lebanon, Maine, is a very appealing example of a traditional pre-war Ford that has been kept close to its original identity while still receiving a few practical upgrades to make it more enjoyable on modern roads. Rather than being turned into a full street rod or heavily modified custom, this car seems to strike a nice middle ground between originality, drivability, and affordability. According to the seller, the car still retains its original flathead V8, which is one of the most important details in the entire listing. For many collectors and vintage Ford enthusiasts, the flathead is a huge part of the appeal because it represents one of the most iconic engines of the pre-war and early post-war era. It may not deliver the performance of a later small block V8 swap, but in my view, it gives the car much more historical character and authenticity. The fact that it has also been upgraded to a 12-volt ignition system is a smart improvement, since that can make starting and reliability better without completely changing the personality of the car. The seller also mentions front disc brake upgrades, modern gauges, and a 3-speed floor-shift manual transmission. To me, those are the kinds of upgrades that make a lot of sense on an older classic like this. The front disc brakes should improve stopping confidence compared to the original setup, while the updated gauges likely make it easier to monitor the car during regular driving. At the same time, keeping a manual transmission helps preserve the old-school driving experience that many buyers are looking for in a 1930s Ford. Another major positive in this listing is the seller's description of the car as a great driver, with everything working as it should. For a vehicle that is now more than 85 years old, that matters just as much as cosmetic appearance. The seller specifically says the car goes down the road the way it should and notes that there are no rust or rot issues, which is especially important for a pre-war steel-bodied Ford. In my opinion, Rust-free structure and road-ready condition can add far more real-world value than shiny paint alone. Visually, the burgundy exterior paired with a black interior sounds like a very fitting combination for a 1939 Ford Deluxe. These cars already have strong styling with their rounded fenders, upright grille, and elegant late 1930s proportions, and a deep burgundy finish only adds to that classic presence. It sounds like the kind of car that would feel equally at home at a local cruise night, a weekend car show, or simply out on a backroad summer drive. Overall, I believe this 1939 Ford Deluxe is an attractive option for someone who wants a real pre-war Ford with its original flathead V8 still in place, but with a few well-chosen upgrades that make it easier and safer to enjoy. It may not be a Concours-level restoration, but as a clean, rust-free, driver-quality classic with authentic character, I think it offers a lot of charm and usable value at its current asking price. Number 13. This 1946 Ford Coupe, currently listed at $12,500 in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, is an affordable post-war American classic that seems to offer exactly what many vintage car enthusiasts are looking for. Honest old-school character, simple flathead V8 power, and a car that can actually be driven and enjoyed rather than just parked in a garage. According to the seller, this coupe is powered by a flathead V8 paired with a 3-speed manual transmission, and it has also been converted to a 12-volt electrical system for improved reliability. What immediately makes this car interesting to me is that it does not sound like a trailer queen or an over-restored show car. Instead, it comes across as a genuine driver-quality classic with personality. The seller even describes it as road-ready and says it can be driven around town regularly, which in my opinion is a big plus. A lot of older classics in this price range are either unfinished projects or cars that still need sorting before they can be enjoyed, so hearing that this one is already being used on the road gives it a very different kind of appeal. The flathead V8 is a major part of that appeal. It may not be a high horsepower engine by modern standards, and the seller is upfront about the fact that this Ford is not a speed demon, but honestly, that is not really the point of a car like this. In my view, the charm of a 1946 Ford Coupe comes from the experience it delivers. The sound of the flathead, the feel of the manual transmission, the look of the body lines, and the fact that you're driving a piece of post-war American automotive history. It is more about style, nostalgia, and presence than outright performance. Another thing I like about this listing is the realism of it. The seller does not oversell the car as some flawless investment-grade example. Instead, it sounds like a usable classic nicknamed Black Betty that has been enjoyed for what it is. Personally, I think that kind of honesty makes a car more appealing because it feels like something you could buy and actually use right away without being afraid to put miles on it. The 12-volt conversion is also worth mentioning because it is one of those upgrades that can make old cars easier to live with. Better starting, better lighting, and improved compatibility with modern electrical components can go a long way in making a vintage driver more practical. And for a car that is being described as road-ready and town-friendly, that kind of upgrade makes a lot of sense. At $12,500, this Ford also feels like one of the more approachable entries into classic coupe ownership. It is not priced like a high-end restoration, but it also does not sound like a complete project. To me, that puts it in a pretty interesting middle ground for someone who wants an old-school Ford with real charm, but without jumping into a much more expensive build. Overall, if the seller's description accurately reflects the car's condition, this 1946 Ford Coupe looks like a fun, honest, and very usable vintage driver. In my opinion, its biggest strength is not that it is rare or highly modified, but that it sounds like the kind of classic you can hop into, fire up, and enjoy for what these old cars were always meant to do: turn heads, make noise, and put a smile on your face every time you take it out on the road. Number 14. This 1935 Hudson Terraplane, currently listed at $39,995 in Chicago, Illinois, is a rare pre-war American classic that stands out for both its historical significance and its increasingly uncommon presence on today's collector car market. Finished in black over a burgundy interior and equipped with a manual transmission, this Terraplane represents a much earlier era of American automotive design, long before the horsepower wars and chrome-heavy styling of the 1950s and 1960s took over the industry. What makes this car especially interesting, in my opinion, is the fact that it is a Hudson Terraplane, a name that doesn't come up nearly as often as Ford, Chevrolet, or Plymouth when people talk about 1930s American classics. That alone gives it a different kind of appeal. It feels like the sort of car that would attract attention not because it's flashy or heavily modified, but because many enthusiasts simply don't get the chance to see one in person very often. For collectors who like owning something a little less common, I think that uniqueness is one of this car's biggest strengths. According to the listing, the vehicle shows 89,235 miles, carries a clean title, and is described as being in excellent condition with no significant damage or problems. The seller doesn't provide a long list of restoration details or mechanical upgrades, which suggests this car may be marketed more on its overall condition and originality rather than on a heavily customized build. Personally, I actually like that, because with a vehicle like a 1935 Terraplane, the charm is often in the car's identity itself, rather than in modifications. Stylistically, cars from this era have a presence that is very different from post-war classics. The 1935 Terraplane comes from a time when fenders were still flowing and dramatic, cabins were upright, and the overall body design carried a kind of Art Deco influence that you just don't see in later decades. In black paint, I imagine this car has a very formal and elegant look, while the burgundy interior probably adds warmth and character to the cabin. That combination feels appropriate for a car this age because it preserves the dignified personality that pre-war sedans and coupes often carry. Another thing I find appealing is the manual transmission because it helps preserve the authentic feel of driving a true 1930s automobile. Cars like this were never about speed in the modern sense. They were about the experience, the mechanical feel, the sound, the slower pace, and the sense that you're operating a genuine piece of automotive history rather than just another classic cruiser with a V8 swap. Overall, if the condition is as good as the seller claims, this 1935 Hudson Terraplane appears to be a very appealing option for someone who values rarity, pre-war styling, and historical character over outright performance. It may not have the instant recognition of a Ford or Chevy from the same period, but in some ways, that's exactly what makes it special. For the right buyer, this looks like the kind of car that offers not just vintage transportation, but a real conversation piece with personality and presence that goes far beyond the usual collector car formula. Number 15. This 1950 Mercury Coupe, currently listed in Stone Creek, Ohio, is a very rough but potentially worthwhile long-term project that offers one of the most desirable post-war custom car foundations in the hobby, even if it comes with major restoration challenges. In my opinion, the biggest reason this car matters is simple. It's a 1950 Mercury two-door coupe. That body style has been a staple of traditional custom car culture for decades, especially in the lead sled world, where chopped and lowered 49 to 51 Mercurys are some of the most iconic customs ever built. So even though this particular example is far from road-ready, the model itself carries a level of desirability that a lot of other rough project cars simply do not. The seller is very upfront about the condition, and honestly, that's helpful. This Mercury has reportedly been sitting since 1975, and it's described as being in very rough shape with significant rust repair needed. From my perspective, that immediately puts it into the category of a serious restoration candidate rather than a casual weekend project. This is the kind of car that would require a buyer who either has fabrication skills, access to a body shop, or a very clear vision for a long-term build. That said, there are still a few positives here. The seller notes that the car does roll and steer well, which may not sound like much, but on a non-running project that has sat for decades, that's actually useful. It means the car can at least be moved around the shop or loaded for transport without being completely seized in place. The seller also mentions having extra parts to go with it, which could help offset the difficulty of sourcing trim or body-specific components later on. There are, however, some major hurdles. The Mercury has broken rear leaf springs, extensive rust issues, and perhaps most importantly, no title. In my opinion, the lack of paperwork is one of the biggest factors a buyer would need to consider before moving forward. Depending on the state, sorting out title issues can be straightforward, or it can become a serious headache. So while the car itself may be worth saving, The paperwork side needs just as much attention as the body. What I do find interesting is that the seller seems to genuinely understand what the car is and what it could become. They aren't pretending it's an easy restoration. Instead, they're basically saying, yes, it's rough, but it's a real 1950 Merc coupe, and that alone makes it worth building if you're the right person for the job. I think that's a fair assessment. A four-door sedan in this condition would be a much tougher sell, but a two-door Mercury coupe still has strong custom car appeal because of its shape, history, and reputation in the hot rod and lead sled world. Overall, I think this 1950 Mercury coupe is best viewed as a high-risk, high-potential project shell. At the right price, it could make sense for a serious builder who has the skill set, patience, and budget to bring a legendary Mercury body back from the edge. It is absolutely not a quick flip or a beginner-friendly project, but for someone who has always wanted to build a traditional custom Merc and doesn't mind starting with something rough, this car still has the bones of something special.